debunk a common myth, and this is one we come across this myth all the time. And if you're an owner of a company, chances are, whether you verbalize this or not, chances are you've probably thought about it at some point during your ownership of your company. And so the myth here today that we're here to debunk is that transferring the business to your kids is the best exit plan.
You really think so, huh, Adam? No, you're going to debunk that.
I'm going to
myth.
debunk that. But
we see so many myths in this business, don't we? And deal with them. But go on.
Well, we're out here to say that that's not necessarily the right thing to do, but it certainly is not always the right thing to do. And there are stats out there if you look around to see that about 1 in 3, so 1/3 of the companies that transfer from one generation to the next successfully, okay? So only 1 in 3 make that happen. Now, it's not to say that...
Is there a big reason for that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for it, I think.
A big one, though.
A big one?
They might just not want it, right?
If it lists the top 5 questions here in terms of reasons why that doesn't happen, I think, one is that it's presumed or assumed that the next generation should just take over. They aren't sure how to say no. I think that's what you're saying, Jack, right? It's like, well, it's always been this way, and it's always been assumed that I'll be the one taking it over, or we'll be the ones taking it over.
So often that's a surprise to the parent. Well, not really a surprise. He or she's been trying to nurture them, bring them along, and in the final analysis, they just don't want it.
No, I think most of the times, too, it's not thought about or talked about until maybe later on. When you start out, you don't necessarily start with the exit in mind. You start to get a company started and moving along and perhaps get away from something else. You see opportunities somewhere, but you're starting the company. You aren't necessarily thinking about how am I eventually going to exit it. But the first thought is usually hey, why not transfer it to the kid or kids, or because that's very simple, right in front of you, and very often those kids are part of the business. Okay, they're actually working there. So from that standpoint, it almost becomes assumed, and not only by the ownership, but by the other employees that were there. They almost again assume that Junior's here or the daughter's here, they're going to be the ones taking things over. So they start to look at that person that way. Even if, to your point, Jack, even if the kid doesn't want it, they're being viewed that way.
Well, a lot of times small business owners are going to be given advice by their counselors, be it an attorney, a professor, and part of their overall plan should have an exit plan to it. And I think the best exit plan that covers all possible bases is to run a profitable company. That's and that gives you the most options. It sounds silly, but you can peddle it to your kids. You can, if they don't want it, you can basically sell it to somebody, and your chances of selling it are very high if that company has a string of profits. And we had somebody an opportunity in our coaching company, a fellow who was coaching about as long as we have, about 15 years, and he was trying to sell his company, and we were about the only person or people who we could talk to about selling his company. And the reason, even though he was profitable, it was a one-man show. And you limit your opportunities that way, transferring to your kids or transferring to anybody. It's very difficult to sell a company if you haven't been profitable, and if it hasn't been developed where it's just not you and your name, because that's all that could be sold, you and your name. It's got to be more than that.
Right.
So a growing profitable company that can be run without you gives you the most options. Kids are not. I know we're talking about kids, but
yeah, we're trying to debunk that myth out there. It's a very common. Again, it's widely held. I remember when I first came back from New York. My dad was at the point in time he'd been running his company for about 25, going on 30 years, and he was starting to think out for the next 10 years or so in terms of what he wanted to do to kind of transition things. And his first thought was my brother or me. Okay, and so he gave us the first option for that. He said, I'll check that out first. If that's going to happen, if not, I want to move on to something else. But he was looking out 10 years, and I realize this is not going to happen tomorrow, especially given the fact that neither my brother nor I were actually working in the company at that point. I was in New York City, he was in San Francisco, so neither of us were here. But in terms of getting the planning down, he wanted to kind of see that. We have a lot of clients where they've got kids working in the company, and it's just presumed. And it's often not even stated that way. Though it's amazing how confusing things can be. Okay, not only for the potential heir apparents, but also for the kid or for the other employees. They aren't quite sure how to take it, and it's a very difficult situation for both the heir apparent as well as for the employees, because the owner, the leadership has to state what their desire is going to be. Don't assume everybody knows what it's going to be, or that if you had a one-off discussion here or there, that people know what's going on.
That's so true. That's such a huge communication issue.
And we've had so many cases over the years where, again, it's and the person or people being anointed as the heir apparents really scares the current employees to death. The idea of that person coming in and taking over becomes very difficult, and usually that happens mostly where the situation is that the heir apparent or the heir apparents have only worked in the company, okay, where they don't have other outside real business experience, because all they know is how mom or dad is running the company. That's what they know. They've seen that, so they assume, well, if that's how they do it, that's how I have to do it.
And it shows so quickly, and coming in as we do from the outside to existing situations, we're introduced to people, we're introduced to the employees. You can see problems quickly, and that's one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, it's it's being able to be open and honest about it, and realizing that if you had to lay out a description or background as far as who would be the right person to kind of take over, what does that person look like? And if the kid or kids don't match, don't fit that bill, okay, well, you can get them trained up over time, but even that might not be the right answer. But not putting your head in the sand and pretending like, hey, we'll just let things kind of take care of themselves, or taking off and letting the kids kind of run by themselves. It's not necessarily what's best for the company.
And that's that really, that experience on the outside is so valuable. You don't realize it until you see a problem like that, and we've seen many. To learn business from an objective situation, and then you can bring that into your company, and that's how it works. That's how it works best. It's rare that somebody can grow up in the company. That's the only company they've ever seen, and they can take the mantle from the parent and basically run this company successfully. Very, very difficult.
It does happen again, but it's not the typical way. And Jack and I have been involved in all those different situations. We've had clients where what he's just talking about is certainly happening. And but keep that in mind as you're trying to figure out who do I transition the company to. It isn't necessarily going to be the kids unless they're the right people for it. So, all right, stick